Sometimes we blame the problems and woes in Nigeria and many colonized countries on the intrusion of the colonial master even after several years of independence. But there are challenges experienced related to colonialism, post-colonial development, and the socio-economic challenges faced by countries that were once colonized. Colonial legacy and economic foundations in the assertion that colonial powers left behind a flourishing economy is a contentious one. While it is true that many colonial administrations developed infrastructure, such as railways, roads, and ports, primarily to extract resources for their own benefit, the economic systems established were often exploitative. The wealth generated during colonial times was largely siphoned off to the colonizers, leaving behind economies that were heavily dependent on a few cash crops or raw materials. Infrastructure and exploitation work hand in hand during colonialism. The infrastructure built during colonial times was often designed to facilitate the extraction of resources rather than to promote local economic development. For example, railways in Nigeria were built to transport agricultural products to ports for export, not to connect local communities or promote internal trade. Resource curse in many post-colonial countries, including Nigeria, where an abundance of natural resources leads to economic mismanagement, corruption, and conflict rather than prosperity. Post-colonial challenges after gaining independence came as hindrance in which many countries faced significant challenges, including political instability, corruption, and a lack of experienced governance. The legacies of colonial rule, such as arbitrary borders and ethnic divisions, often exacerbated these issues. Governance and corruption was detected in the transition from colonial rule to self-governance. Many newly independent nations struggled with establishing effective governance structures. Corruption became rampant in some cases, as leaders prioritized personal gain over national development. Economic mismanagement in some instances where economic systems left behind were not conducive to sustainable development. Countries often relied on the same export-oriented models that had been established during colonial times, which did not promote diversification or resilience. There is a tendency to blame colonial powers for ongoing problems in post-colonial societies. While colonialism undoubtedly had lasting impacts, it is also essential to recognize the agency of post-colonial leaders and societies in shaping their destinies. While the colonial legacy is significant, it is crucial for post-colonial nations to take responsibility for their governance and economic policies. Blaming colonial powers can sometimes serve as a distraction from addressing internal issues such as corruption, mismanagement, and lack of accountability. The call for reparations is a complex and often contentious issue. Advocates argue that reparations are necessary to address the historical injustices and economic exploitation that occurred during colonialism. Critics, however, may argue that the focus should be on building sustainable economies and governance structures rather than seeking compensation from former colonial powers. That the resources and legacies left by colonial powers could be sufficient for future generations if managed properly is a perspective that emphasizes the importance of good governance, sustainable development, and the need for a shift in mindset. Countries need to focus on diversifying their economies, investing in education, and promoting innovation to create a more sustainable future. This involves moving away from reliance on a few commodities and fostering local industries. Strengthening institutions, promoting transparency, and ensuring accountability are crucial for overcoming the challenges that many post-colonial nations face. This requires active participation from civil society and the public. Emphasizing local cultures, histories, and practices can empower communities and foster a sense of identity and purpose that transcends colonial legacies. While the impacts of colonialism are profound and lasting, it is essential for post-colonial nations to take ownership of their development paths. This involves recognizing the complexities of their histories, addressing internal challenges, and leveraging the resources and legacies available to them for sustainable growth and prosperity. The journey toward true independence and self-determination is ongoing and requires collective effort and commitment from all sectors of society, as could be seen in the improvements so far experienced in some countries. Instances where countries have managed to achieve economic growth and development after gaining independence from colonial powers could be cited evidence. After gaining independence from British colonial rule in 1963, Singapore transformed from a struggling port city into a global financial hub. The government implemented policies that promoted industrialization, education, and foreign investment, leading to rapid economic growth and a high standard of living. Following Japanese colonization, 1910–1945, South Korea faced significant challenges. However, after the Korean War, the country adopted a series of economic reforms and industrial policies that led to rapid economic development, transforming it into one of the world's leading economies. After gaining independence from British colonial rule in 1966, Botswana has been one of the fastest-growing economies in Africa. The country has effectively managed its diamond resources and invested in education and infrastructure, leading to significant improvements in living standards. After gaining independence from Spanish colonial rule in the early 19th century, Chile experienced periods of economic growth, particularly in the late 20th century. The country implemented market-oriented reforms in the 1980s that spurred economic growth and development. While the legacy of British colonialism is complex and includes significant challenges, India has emerged as one of the world's largest economies since gaining independence in 1947. Economic liberalization in the 1990s led to rapid growth, technological advancement, and an expanding middle class. After gaining independence from British colonial rule in 1957, Malaysia has experienced significant economic growth, driven by its natural resources, manufacturing, and a focus on education and infrastructure development. After gaining independence from British colonial rule in 1957, Ghana has faced various challenges but has also made strides in economic development, particularly in agriculture and natural resources. While these examples illustrate instances of growth and development post-colonization, it is essential to recognize that the legacies of colonialism can still have lasting effects on social, political, and economic structures in these countries. The outcomes of colonization are often mixed, and the path to development can be influenced by a variety of factors beyond colonial history.